Hello, it's Ricardo and welcome back to Star Trek Resurgence. Now, Star Trek Resurgence is let's face it, a story-driven narrative, hang-on-for-the-ride type of game. It offers a compelling narrative experience that stays true to the spirit of Star Trek, and that is evident all the way through the game. By weaving a story that explores themes of diplomacy, trust, the legacy of ancient civilizations, this game provides players with a chance to live out their own Starfleet adventures, although gameplay is somewhat limited and you do feel a little bit carried along for the ride sometimes. The branching narrative and impactful choices ensure that each playthrough can be somewhat unique, depending on the choices at critical junctures that you take, thus offering a reason to revisit the game and explore different paths. And you can use a certain application to go in and track the decisions that you've made on your playthrough. While the core story wraps up within the confines of the game, Resurgence does leave room for future exploration. The potential for a sequel could delve deeper into the consequences of your actions and explore the lingering effects of the Tacon Empire, albeit a Tacon threat, or indeed introduce new challenges for the crew of the USS Resolute. Now, Star Trek Resurgence did receive a mixed critical reception upon its release in 2023. The story and setting, for example, is where viewers praised the game's adherence to Star Trek lore, with its engaging narrative exploring human classical themes of diplomacy, exploration, and the consequences of past conflict and misplaced loyalty. The character development is second to none, with the dual protagonists of Jada Radek, the first officer and soon-to-be captain, and Carter Diaz, a young, spirited engineer, were lauded for their distinct personalities and perspectives, allowing players to connect with both sides of the story and develop empathy with the characters of the game, which you could. The branching narrative gave an impact of player choices on the story's direction, and the character relationships were seen as a strong point, offering replayability and a sense of agency with the game. There were, however, some weaknesses, and some people and some reviewers and players noted some technical glitches and performance issues that occasionally marred the experience. Animations and character models were considered decent but not top of the line, and as good as the graphics were, there was a certain cartoony aspect of them that is reminiscent of the old Telltale games of old. There is a lack of exploration, and reviewers and players alike noted the limited ability to freely explore the ship and its environment, although that was somewhat dissipated by a Tour the Resolute function on the main menu, which, to be fair, was really good and got the idea of doing that before you played the game to orientate yourself with the ship. Now, as I mentioned, Star Trek Resurgence did garner quite a favourable score, a mid-70s range on review aggregator sites, with many publications commending the game for its strong narrative, again, which is spot on for this type of game. It is a faithful representation of the Star Trek universe, and the developers should be proud. However, those technical limitations and a lack of gameplay variety were cited as some shortcomings. With the technical aspects, a functional Trek experience such as Star Trek Resurgence did utilise a third-person perspective during exploration and dialogue sequences. Character models and environments are indeed visually appealing, with very few errors or clipping or terrible frame rates involved. A lot of it has been fixed and patched, certainly now the game is on Steam. However, sometimes that animation, like I mentioned, could feel a little bit stiff, and the textures might not have been top-notch. The game uses a point-and-click interface for interacting with objects and characters. Environmental exploration is limited, as we've mentioned, with players primarily navigating predetermined paths within specific areas, especially once you get into the caves and that sort of aspect of things that becomes more prevalent. Quick time events are used for some action and combat encounters, typically when you've got the phaser out, requiring players to respond with the button presses within a short time frame. The soundtrack does feature a blend of orchestral music that invokes the classic Star Trek sound and original compositions that complement the narrative of the game. The voice acting is excellent, with the cast delivering believable performances that do indeed bring the characters to life. And that's one of the things. The narrative in this game is absolutely key. So where from here? Well, the potential for a DLC content is available. However, it is a little bit uncertain. Is this game a standalone? It certainly does stand alone as a game in itself. Could there be more adventures of the USS Resolute and their crew, or what's left of them? There are certainly definite avenue arcs that could be exploited to not only get rid of existing characters, but bring old characters back in for that story continuity. Given its episode-based expansions, new episodes could delve deeper into the consequences of your player actions in the main game. This could involve exploring the rebuilding of trust between the captain and the crew, the political ramifications of the Takon threat, or even introducing a new conflict for the USS Resolute to tackle. Focusing on crew members, the individual crew members like Zarya or Dr. Isha Sharma could be given their own focused narratives, offering players the chance to see the events from a different perspective, or perhaps even going back in time and exploring the events of the cataclysmic problem that was alluded to when we first find the ship in dry dock and the crew disheartened and broken. These prequel missions could explore those backstories and the backstories of those events, not only as Jara's experiences during the Klingon War, or Carter's rise through the Starfleet ranks and his experience in regards to being engineer on the ship. The success of the base game and the fan reception will likely determine whether or not Dynamic Labs or Brunner House decide to pursue additional content for Star Trek Resurgence. As I'm sure we all know, this license must be costly. However, the potential for expansion within this narrative framework does remain a possibility and could well be really intriguing. Star Trek Resurgence, despite its technical limitations, and those are limited to be honest, does deliver a compelling narrative experience for fans of the franchise. The chance to step into the shoes of a Starfleet officer, to navigate diplomatic challenges, follow the Prime Directive, uncover ancient secrets is a treat for all Trekkies, young and old. While the gameplay might not be groundbreaking, and it certainly isn't, the engaging story and the impactful choices make it a worthwhile journey for those of us who want to go and game in the Star Trek universe, but are lacking a platform. The interactive nature of Star Trek Resurgence does indeed draw thematic connections to classic Star Trek The Next Generation episodes, like The Offspring, exploring artificial life, and The Menagerie, visiting past conflicts. The game also cleverly integrates elements from more obscure Where No Man Has Gone Before, The Next Generation pilot, introducing the legacy of the long dormant Takon Empire. Now you take the helm as Jara Rydek and Carter Diaz. Now Jara Rydek is a Kobliad, a half Klingon first officer. Jara blends a blend of logic and tactical prowess to the bridge, having been on her last engagement tactical officer. Being brought on as the first officer to the current captain is quite the leg up, and there's quite a few crew problems who said they should have recruited from within. Players experience the story through her eyes, navigating diplomatic negotiations and making those critical decisions that can affect the entire crew. Carter Diaz, however, is a brilliant but often overlooked human engineer on the lower decks, and his perspective offers a glimpse into the everyday lives of the crew and allows players to solve somewhat technical problems with a mouse and usually a phaser to overcome challenges from a more technical standpoint. Now, gameplay revolves around the dialogue choices, as we've mentioned, with each character's decisions impacting the story's progression. Players also engage in exploration sections, although they are limited, piloting Starship shuttles, participating in quick-time events such as getting the phasers out and perhaps even using your tricorder. These light combat scenarios are okay. They're okay. They really are okay. Is it a first-person shooter like Doom? No, it isn't. But as Star Trek Resurgence unfolds across multiple chapters, with the narrative seamlessly switching between Jara and Carter's viewpoints, a detailed breakdown is going to be a little bit lengthy. In Chapter 1, Scars of the Past, the game opens with Jara Rydek arriving on the USS Resolute, a Starfleet science vessel, a Centaur-class science vessel, still recovering from a catastrophic warp core accident. We do learn about Jara's troubled past and her conflicted relationship with a Captain Leonard. A tense exchange with Ambassador Spock does indeed set the stage for a mission, meditating a dispute between technologically advanced Hatari and the resource-rich Elidians. In Chapter 2, though, A Fragile Peace, players do take control of Carter Diaz, tasked with repairing a shuttle damaged during the Ion Storm, this mysterious storm that is causing an awful lot of problems. We do meet the best friend, security officer Ziara, and experience the camaraderie between the existing engineering team. Meanwhile, Jara negotiates with a Hatari leader. And The Secrets in the Shadows, which is Chapter 3, has you switching back to Jara, players navigating a diplomatic dinner aboard a Resolute, or at least an exchange. Tensions rise between the Hatari and the Lydians, although dialogue choices are somewhat limited, whilst Carter meanwhile discovers a hidden compartment in the shuttle constraining a strange device. With Chapter 4, A Diplomatic Nightmare, negotiations on the Elidian homeworld take a turn for the worse. Sabotage disrupts the proceedings, leading to accusations and near-escalated warfare. With Chapter 5, Whispers of the Past, back on the Resolute, Carter delves further into the device he found. He discovers a hidden message from a long-lost civilization, hinting at a connection to the ancient Takon Empire. With the help of his crewmates, he then tries to decipher the message while keeping it a secret from the bridge crew, or just not releasing the information until he's sure. In Echoes of the Takon, which is Chapter 6, Jara attempts to unravel the truth between Sabotage, encountering a mysterious figure with knowledge of the Takon. Players face a critical choice: trust the source or maintain their loyalty to Starfleet. And that's one of the things that flows all the way through in regard to the current ship's captain. He is so consumed by his own hubris, he's more akin of saving face and not making another cock-up as to doing the right thing. As Jara, players participate in a daring rescue mission to save a kidnapped Elidian officer. And then the true mastermind of the sabotage seems to be revealed. A disillusioned Starfleet officer is driven by a warped sense of duty and fear of the Takon's power, and seems to have been manipulating both sides for their own end. This individual, using advanced technology, has orchestrated the conflict to weaken both the Hatari and Elidians, paving the way for the Takon resurgence and bioengineering. Now here, our first officer, Jara's actions will determine the level of trust between her and the crew. She can choose to expose the culprits publicly, risking immunity or a mutiny, or attempting to handle the situation discreetly. In Chapter 9, which is entitled The Takon Legacy, Carter, along with his teammates... Now, I'm not going to go too far into what's actually happening with the game, but suffice to say, this game is set about a year after the events of Star Trek Nemesis. Star Trek Resurgence does take you on a thrilling adventure aboard the Resolute, a Starfleet science vessel, recovering from a major incident. The story unfolds as the Resolute embarks on this mission to mediate a tense situation between technologically advanced Atari and the resource-rich Elidians. What starts as a diplomatic challenge quickly spirals, in fact, into a web of sabotage, hidden agendas, and the chilling re-emergence of an ancient threat, the Takon Empire. Though your choices, you will influence the course of the narrative. Would you prioritize diplomacy or find a peaceful solution, or get the phasers out. Those forceful methods will have an impact on what you do. Meanwhile, Carter's technical expertise as an engineer does tend to uncover the truth of the Takon's return and their plans to unleash a dormant army of bioengineered people stored in crystals. This narrative does massively capture the spirit of Star Trek, like I've mentioned, and while the gameplay is primarily focused around exploration and going through the motions, dialogue choices and quick time events really are a break from the monotony. They really are. This break through the quick time events could be a tricorder, it could be a phaser, it could be you piloting a shuttle or crouching under a beam. It is really that limited. For those of you who are into all action games, this might not be the game for you. If you appreciate a good story and about 8 hours of gameplay solid, then to be fair, this might be a good investment for your hard-earned money. We did mention some technical limitations and glitches. Upon occasion, I seem to be clipping through my own head, seeing the back of my eyeballs, but other than that, everything seemed to work all right. Every decision you make, from diplomatic to the aggressive to the peaceful, approaches to handling tense situations and does indeed tend to shape the story's direction with the relationships with your crewmates. Now, you will burn some bridges, you will lose some crewmates, but how do you feel about that yourself? Now, it's only a game, but if they do bring out a DLC, there could be an impactful measure against this. The ending does leave room for further exploration, as I've mentioned, with the crew of the Resolute rebuilding trust and facing new challenges. Will a lingering threat from the Takon Empire require further action? Or will there be a completely new story narrative? Whether or not a DLC content materializes, Star Trek Resurgence offers a compelling journey through the Star Trek universe, through the digital frontier, allowing you to boldly go where several gamers have gone before, but perhaps not in this narrative. I've been Ricardo. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you soon.